are here on the 55th floor of the Hilton Fuzhou, and we've been here for about a week talking about, you guessed it, the trade war, right? The thing that everyone's talking about. If you're in business, even if you're just a consumer, you're talking about, it's on top of mind. We are getting the perspective here of the China side, right? All the players in this value chain here, the factories, the sub-suppliers, the buyers even. My name is George. I'm the founder CEO of Omniport Consulting. We are supply chain on demand experts. We've been doing this for over a decade. Let's talk about what's going on here in China. The palpable tension here, the palpable feeling here in China is basically one of uncertainty. Sort of the same as the US, but here you can feel it a little bit more. I haven't walked into a room, I haven't walked into a conversation with people where this was not brought up, and not just brought up, but discussed extensively, right? From factories to like I said, sub-suppliers and so on and so forth. The state of the trade war, it started at 10%. Now recently it escalated to 25%. It's now including a lot more categories of products, right? And actually at 25%, you're lucky, right? There's another category of products, kind of in the steel, in the building materials, that actually have anti-dumping and countervailing taxes and fees levied onto it of a couple 100%, effectively killing off the entire industry. For example, 2017, the quartz granite industry was effectively completely killed off in the U.S. Through anti-dumping and countervailing measures. So that's going on top of, there's a narrative there on top of the existing tariffs. So that's kind of the climate. Everyone's uncertain. Now, who are the players here? Right? We spent time with different factory owners, pretty large factories, 8 figures plus, that have the ability to withstand this. And we were asking about, okay, how's the situation, the status of factories here in China? Very interesting. The smaller factories, the ones that don't technically own their own land and their own building, they've gone out of business for the reason that capacity right now across factories around China is probably about 40 to 50% instead of the 90 to 100% capacity that they've been experiencing for the last decade or so. The reason for that is their big customers in this state of uncertainty, they're not releasing POs. All right? Would you? If you're worried, if you're uncertain, would you be aggressive in this business climate? You wouldn't. So that's what they're seeing. Their biggest customers, there's still POs going, work is still getting done, but not at the volume. So the capacity is significant right now. And the smaller factories, without that cash flow, without that capacity, they've gone out of business. So for the larger factories, anecdotally, they're between kind of a rock and a hard place. I was having dinner last week with a arts and crafts factory, fairly large, 8 figures, US, and they were saying that when the tariffs first came in, they had existing POs that they had finished, and the products actually were on the water going to the final destination. Tariffs hit, and their customers said, hold on, we don't want this with the tariffs, we're not gonna buy it, right? So as you guys probably know, a lot of you guys are on 30-70 terms, something like that. Their customer paid the 30 deposit, and as the inventory was floating on the water after the factory had made it, they told them they wanted to cancel it. They would rather have given up that 30% deposit than to pay the tariffs, and they use that to leverage the factory into giving them a bigger discount, right? So if you were standing in the shoes of the factory, what do, right? Do you only take that 30%, or do you agree to this discount after the fact and at least recoup, the majority of your costs, right? So they were running into this sort of leverage situation with their big customers, which has created this environment of factories right now are scared to take on, in China, are scared to take on new business, right? So they're only extending business with existing relationships, and capacity is low. That's from one point of the value chain, right? So from the consumer, the buyer side, right now, if you're looking globally, there's really still not technically a great place to manufacture your goods, right? China's got the infrastructure, they work quick, they can get your stuff out. They have the sub-suppliers, which is very, very important. The nuts, screws, bolts, wood that you need, fabrics, it's all here, right? And we're hearing a lot of people, talk about, hey, why don't you just go to Vietnam or go to Malaysia or go to Thailand? And we were talking extensively about that this week, asking not only the factories, but also the buyers, why aren't you guys going to these other places? Why are we still in China? And what we found out was that moving to, and we'll say Vietnam as an example, because that's just the first thing that factory owners default to when they say moving out of China. Vietnam right now has a couple of limitations and difficulties in moving. Industries such as textiles and textile shoes, those low profit margin markets, they've already moved to Vietnam years ago, right? So they're already there. So they got a head start, right? If you're not already there and you're thinking about moving to Vietnam or finding factories in Vietnam, here's what's going on right now. So if you're a factory owner, you're going there and you're looking at space and you're looking at land. There's so much factory owners going there looking at land right now that the land prices in Vietnam has skyrocketed, right? Making it not so profitable to move operations. Also, what we're hearing is that if you want to set up operations in Vietnam, your cost of labor may not be cheaper than China. You have to bring your own people with your own knowledge to go run it, right? So an average worker here in China will get minimum twice their wage to move to Vietnam to help run the factory. And that's just an average worker, right? So you factor that in, then you're getting squeezed on your margins again. Now, the local staff there that you can find, workers in, say, Vietnam, you run into sort of a management issue, right? You have language, you have work ethic, you have, the alignment, right, of what you're doing. So they were reporting that management is a big issue when you're talking about moving things over to Vietnam. And on top of that, things like infrastructure, right, the capacity of ports and things like that, even down to roads and consistency of electricity, like all these different factors make it, although it seems like, it sounds nice, why don't you just get out of China? The actual fact of the matter is that the infrastructure and the ability to leverage that price advantage really is difficult to gain in Vietnam. All right, for example, if you want screws, right, a lot of the products right now, if you want screws or accessories, they're actually imported from China. So you got to go this big loop just to find things like screws to make your products. Okay, so after a lot of back and forth, the consensus was that China's still the game, right? And we have this short-term, big issue, but short-term pain that we have to work through, right? So now, if China is still the game, then we must shift our focus over to how do we now mitigate and navigate this environment. And it's such an interesting topic that everyone's talking about, everyone's looking for, that we put together 5 strategies to navigate the trade war here. And we've come come up with a white paper, just email me, George at Omniport Consulting. I will send it to you personally with these 5 strategies. Right? So if the game's still here, and how do we position your company to not only navigate what's going on right now, but also thrive after these tariffs go away? Because I feel like it's most likely a temporary thing, right? So how do you start making the strategies right now to position yourself to thrive afterwards? This is what we want to talk about. So here are our 5 strategies. Number 1, the most obvious one. If you're a buyer right now and you have volume, you have to push back on your factory to split the pain with you, right? The factories here in China, they understand that they must take a little bit of a step back. Everyone has to share in this burden. So that conversation, they're expecting this already. Right? They're not going to be surprised. So as a buyer, you have to push back on and get some sort of chop here to split this pain. Number 2, we would really suggest that you negotiate all your orders in Chinese dollars, in renminbi. A lot of buyers in the U.S., they still negotiate in U.S. dollars because it's easier to keep track of, but if you actually have been negotiating in renminbi for the past year, you would have enjoyed over a 10% increase just in your buying power through the US dollar being stronger. As of today, the US dollar is about 7-1, which it hasn't been in years, right? So that buying power right there would have offset a significant chunk of your tariff. Strategy number 3, take a look at your HTS codes and make sure you do a deep dive in there to see if you can reclassify your products into an HTS code that isn't tariffed, right? It's tedious work. You have to really get in there and kind of get into the details, but it would be fruitful and be worth it if you found an HTS code that bypassed the tariffs, right? It's best practices. You should always be doing this. Now, strategy number 4, and this one is more of an advanced strategy, but it's very, very important. You have to understand the VAT tax refund framework here in China. The value-added tax is what the government subsidizes factories. It ranges from 10% or so up to 16%, and that's what they give the factories to incentivize them to export more, right? So not only is the factories making whatever profit they're making off of your order, they also have this cushion underneath that's subsidized by the government. It's profit, straight profit to them. So you need to start figuring out how you can position to be part of that conversation for that VAT tax, right? Either you get a component of it or you're negotiating discounts off of it, but that's got to be part of your strategic mix there. I've had friends that had unbelievable success just negotiating this VAT to the point that now they're 50% owners of a multi-million dollar factory in China just based off of talking and negotiating this point, right? So a lot of great things negotiating off that VAT tax. You have to start leveraging that right now. And finally, strategy number 5, which is a little bit outside of the box, but if you can do this thing, actually move your value chain back a step and do the final fit and finish in the US or Canada, right? So what you're doing is you are sending the components and the assemblies from China, right? Which reclassifies this in a different HTS code. It's not a finished product, right? You get there to the US or wherever you are, and you do the final finish there, fit and finish there. The benefits to that is you get to bypass the HTS. You get to also leverage things like final mile customization. You can do quick customizations because you're actually assembly there in the US. And you also obviously get to leverage the made in the US badge while you're still leveraging the international scalability of China. So actually, besides those 5 strategies, we actually have a couple that we're keeping in our back pockets just for our customers. But if you email me directly, George at Omniport Consulting, happy to share those with you and walk you through those as well. So remember, in uncertainty, there's always opportunity, right? So if you're looking at, if you're implementing the strategies we just talked about, it'll not only put you in the best position to navigate what's going on right now with the trade war, but when those tariffs go away, you'll be putting yourself in such a great position over your competition and the entire market.